May 19th, 1944. Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton stood on the bridge of USS England, watching empty Pacific swells roll past his destroyer escort. 1,400 tons of welded steel, 3 3-inch guns, a crew of 186 men, most of whom had never seen combat. The radio message from Pearl Harbor was clear. A Japanese submarine, I-16, was heading toward Bougainville with rice for starving garrison troops. Intelligence expected the submarine to arrive at Bougainville by 8 in the evening on May 22nd. 3 days away. 3 days to find one submarine in an ocean that stretched 14,000 miles at its widest point. Pendleton adjusted the brim of his cap against the tropical sun. The England was hunting submarines with equipment nobody truly trusted yet. A British invention called Hedgehog. 24 spigot mortars mounted on the foredeck like bristling spines. Each projectile weighed 65 pounds, 7.2 inches in diameter, filled with 35 pounds of Torpex explosive. Unlike depth charges that exploded at preset depths, these bombs only detonated on contact with something solid, direct hits only. Behind him, Executive Officer Lieutenant John Williamson checked calculations on the navigation chart. Williamson ran this ship in ways Pendleton never needed to discuss. 6 months of relentless drilling. Every man knew his station. Every station knew its sequence. Sonar operators who could distinguish whale songs from propeller signatures. Hedgehog crews who could reload in darkness. Engine room gangs who maintained turbines through storms that bent steel railings. The Japanese did not know about Hedgehog. Not really. They knew about depth charges. Depth charges announced themselves with massive underwater explosions that disrupted sonar for half an hour. Depth charges gave submarine commanders time to evade, to dive deeper, to change course while their hunters sailed blind through turbulent water. Hedgehog was different. Hedgehog was silent unless it hit. The submarine remained visible on sonar throughout the attack. No underwater thunder, no masking explosions. Just 24 projectiles arcing through air, splashing into water in an elliptical pattern 200 yards ahead of the ship, sinking at 100 feet per second toward hulls that could not see them coming. In the wardroom below, men played cards. In the engine room, turbines hummed steady rhythms. On the deck, sailors checked ammunition and cleaned 3-inch guns that might never fire at surface targets. The England was an economy warship, a destroyer escort, not a destroyer. Smaller, cheaper, built for convoy protection and submarine hunting while fleet destroyers fought in major engagements. But economy did not mean inadequate. The England displaced 1,673 tons fully loaded, length of 306 feet, beam of 36 feet, draft of 8.7 feet. Turbo-electric drive generating 12,000 horsepower, turning one screw, producing 23 knots at top speed. For anti-submarine work, she carried 2 stern depth charge racks, 8 K-gun projectors that hurled depth charges 150 yards to either side, and the Hedgehog mount forward of the bridge. The sonar equipment was new, the radar was new. The voice radio that allowed real-time coordination between ships was new. Everything about modern anti-submarine warfare was new, tested in the Atlantic against German U-boats, now deployed in the Pacific, where Japanese submarines operated under entirely different doctrines. German U-boats hunted merchant convoys. Wolf packs converged on cargo ships carrying food and fuel. Japanese submarines hunted warships. They scouted for carrier task forces. They shadowed battle groups. They wasted their strength searching for aircraft carriers, while American submarines systematically destroyed Japan's merchant fleet, ship by ship, tanker by tanker, convoy by convoy. By May 1944, Japan's strategy was failing. Raw materials from Southeast Asia could not reach the home islands. Steel production dropped. Oil refineries stood idle. Aircraft factories slowed. The empire was starving for resources, while its submarines prowled empty oceans searching for fleet engagements that never materialized in the places Japanese admirals expected. At noon on May 19th, Sonar operator Harrison Bates called from the sound room. Contact, possible submarine, bearing 015, range 4,000 yards. Pendleton moved to the bridge wing. Williamson was already there, binoculars raised. The ocean looked empty. Blue water, white caps, no periscopes visible. But sonar did not lie. Something metallic moved beneath the surface, generating acoustic signatures that did not match biological sounds. Williamson lowered his binoculars. It is a submarine, moving slow, probably on batteries, conserving power for the final approach to Bougainville. The England turned toward the contact. Speed increased to 15 knots. Too fast, and the ship's own propeller noise would mask sonar returns. Too slow, and the submarine might escape. 15 knots was the balance point, fast enough to close distance while maintaining acoustic clarity. In the sound room, Bates pressed padded headphones against his ears, listening to echoes that transformed into information. The submarine was not evading, not yet. Perhaps the Japanese commander did not realize he had been detected. Perhaps he believed his submarine remained invisible to American technology. He was about to learn otherwise. If you are enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. At 14:30 hours, the England's sonar locked onto I-16 with perfect clarity. Range dropped to 2,000 yards, 1,500, 1,000. The submarine commander finally realized danger approached from above. He changed course, tried to dive deeper, attempted to slip beneath thermal layers that might deflect sonar beams. But the England's sonar held contact. Modern equipment, recently installed, tracked the submarine through every maneuver. Williamson ordered the first attack run. Hedgehog crews scrambled to their stations. The steel cradle rotated slightly, aligning spigots toward the predicted intercept point. Fire control calculated submarine depth, speed, course. Numbers fed into the Hedgehog firing solution. At range of 500 yards, Williamson gave the order. Fire. 24 projectiles launched in rapid sequence. Small propellant charges sent each mortar arcing upward. They peaked 50 feet above the ocean, then fell, nose first, into water that swallowed them without ceremony. The projectiles sank through blue water turned green, descending into darkness, where I-16 maneuvered desperately, trying to evade. Attackers the Japanese commander could hear but not see. The projectiles landed in an elliptical pattern, mathematics and engineering combined into geometry. If the submarine occupied any portion of that ellipse, at least one projectile would strike. Silence. The projectiles passed through water. The submarine twisted. No explosion. Miss. Sonar still held contact. The submarine was trying a new tactic, following directly in the England's wake, hoping turbulence would mask its acoustic signature. Clever. That tactic had worked against depth charge attacks. Turbulence disrupted sonar. Explosions created noise. Submarines escaped in the confusion. But Hedgehog attacks produced no explosions on a miss. No turbulence, no acoustic chaos. The sonar remained clear. Contact held firm. Williamson ordered the second run. The England circled, repositioning. Fire control recalculated. The submarine commander was playing a dangerous game, staying close to his hunter, gambling that American size. Technology could not track him through his own evasive maneuvers. Second attack. Fire. 24 more projectiles arced and fell. Silence again. The submarine had shifted position just enough to avoid the pattern, but its battery power was depleting. Every minute submerged at high speed consumed energy that could not be replaced until the submarine surfaced to run diesel engines. Third run. Fire. Miss. The Japanese commander was good, experienced. Perhaps he had survived previous depth charge attacks using these same tactics, had learned to read the patterns, to anticipate American behavior. Fourth run. Fire. Miss. In the wardroom, some crew members wondered if Hedgehog worked at all. 4 attacks, 0 hits. Depth charges would have detonated by now, would have damaged something, forced the submarine to surface or flee. But Williamson and Pendleton understood the mathematics. Each attack narrowed the submarine's options. Each miss eliminated evasion patterns. The Japanese commander was running out of battery power, running out of maneuvers, running out of ocean in which to hide. Fifth run. Fire control operators triple-checked calculations. Sonar operators refined the contact. The submarine was slowing. Battery power was nearly exhausted. The commander faced a terrible choice. Surface now and fight with deck guns, or continue underwater and hope the Americans gave up. He chose to stay submerged. The Hedgehog projectiles fell, 24 bombs descending through cold Pacific water. The submarine commander ordered hard rudder, tried one final evasive turn. 4 projectiles struck the pressure hull simultaneously. The explosions were not large, 35 pounds of Torpex per bomb, but they struck directly against steel plating designed to withstand external water pressure, not internal detonations at contact points. The hull ruptured. Cold seawater under pressure blasted through the breaches faster than bulkhead doors could close. Lieutenant, Commander Takeuchi Yoshitaka, and 106 crew members died within seconds. I, 16, veteran of 9 war patrols, attacker of Pearl Harbor with midget submarines, raider in the Indian Ocean, supply runner to Guadalcanal and New Guinea, sank in water deep enough that no salvage would ever retrieve her. On the surface, the England's crew felt the detonations through the hull. Distinctive vibrations, not like depth charge explosions. These were sharper, harder, the sound of metal striking metal followed by catastrophic failure. Then came the evidence. A large oil slick spread across blue water. Debris floated to the surface. Pieces of planking, cork insulation, personal effects. Lieutenant John Williamson headed toward the wardroom for coffee. A young seaman stopped him on the way. How many men were on that submarine? 40? 80? Williamson looked at the boy. He could not have been more than 19 years old, probably from some small town in Iowa or Nebraska. Probably had never killed anyone before today. Probably was realizing that war meant real deaths, not just strategic objectives and military targets. About 100, Williamson said. It is war. Kill or be killed. But when Williamson reached the wardroom and poured his coffee, it did not taste as good as he expected. 100 men were dead, sailors like himself, men with families, men who believed they were serving their country honorably. Men who drowned in darkness, trapped in steel tubes, lungs burning, water rising, knowing they would never see sunlight again. War was not abstract anymore. It was 100 bodies sinking toward the ocean floor. But there was no time for reflection. The radio message from Pearl Harbor had included additional intelligence. The Japanese were establishing a picket line, 7 submarines spread across 200 miles between Truk and the Admiralty Islands, a scouting line designated NA, designed to intercept American carrier task forces before they could strike the Mariana Islands or the Western Caroline Islands or the final approaches to the Philippines. 7 submarines. The England had just sunk one, 6 remained, and American intelligence knew exactly where they were stationed. Admiral Soemu Toyoda sat in his headquarters at Tawi-Tawi in the southern Philippines, studying intelligence reports and trying to predict where the Americans would strike next. General Douglas MacArthur was advancing along the New Guinea coast. Admiral Chester Nimitz was preparing operations in the Central Pacific. But which direction? The Marianas? The Palos? Western New Guinea? Toyoda needed information. He needed early warning. He needed submarines positioned where American task forces would have to pass. So he established the NA line. 7 submarines spaced evenly along the most likely invasion route. They would detect American carrier groups days before the invasion fleets arrived. They would radio contact reports. They would give Toyoda time to position his combined fleet for the decisive battle that would destroy American naval power and save the empire. It was a good plan. It would have worked, but Toyoda made one critical mistake. He transmitted the orders by radio. And at Pearl Harbor, cryptographers in Fleet Radio Unit Pacific intercepted those transmissions, decoded them, and passed the information to Commander Hamilton Haynes, commanding officer of Escort Division 39. Haynes commanded 3 destroyer escorts, USS George, USS Raby, and USS England. 3 small warships, 1,400 tons each, against 7 Japanese submarines positioned along a 200-mile line in open ocean. On paper, it should have been impossible. Destroyer escorts were designed for convoy protection, not offensive submarine hunting. The ocean was vast. Submarines were small. Finding one submarine in thousands of square miles of empty water required luck, persistence, and technology that barely existed. But Haynes had several advantages. He knew where the submarines were stationed. He had signals intelligence providing real-time updates. He had modern sonar and radar. And he had the England, with a crew so well drilled that they could execute attack runs in darkness, in storms, in conditions where other ships would break off contact and try again later. The 3 destroyer escorts formed a scouting line. 16,000 yards between ships, enough separation to cover maximum ocean while maintaining mutual support. They headed toward the NA line at cruising speed, sonar arrays active, radar sweeping the horizon, radio operators listening for Japanese transmissions that would reveal submarine positions with each coded message. May 22nd, 0350 hours. USS George detected a radar contact. Something small on the surface, range 17,000 yards. The contact disappeared within seconds. A submarine diving after detecting the American radar emissions. It was Row 106. A. Kaichu-class coastal submarine. 600 tons displacement, 200 feet long, crew of 56 men, armed with 4 torpedo tubes and 1 3-inch deck gun. Designed for defensive operations around Japanese bases, now deployed on a scouting mission far beyond its intended operational range, George closed to attack range. Sonar gained contact on the submerged submarine. George fired Hedgehogs. Miss. The projectiles splashed into empty water. The submarine maneuvered away, trying to escape, but sonar held the contact. England moved in. Williamson studied the sonar display, calculated the submarine's probable course, estimated depth from the strength of the acoustic return. He ordered the first attack run. Miss. The submarine was small, fast, maneuverable, harder to hit than the larger I-16. Second attack, miss again. The submarine's commander was good. He understood sonar. He knew how to use thermal layers. He knew how to minimize his acoustic signature. But he could not remain submerged forever. Battery power depleted with every evasive maneuver. Speed dropped as power reserves diminished. The submarine's movements became slower, more predictable. Third attack. Williamson refined the firing solution, adjusted for the submarine's decreasing speed, compensated for drift. The Hedgehog crews stood ready. The order came, fire. 10 to 12 projectiles struck Row 106 simultaneously. The submarine's small pressure hull could not withstand multiple hits. Steel plating ruptured. Water flooded every compartment. The submarine imploded under the pressure, compressed by the ocean itself into twisted metal that sank toward the bottom, carrying all 56 crew members to unmarked graves. Oil and debris surfaced. The England circled, confirming the kill. 1 down, 5 to go, May 23rd, 07:17 hours. The 3 destroyer escorts continued their sweep up the NA line. American intelligence had decoded Japanese transmissions, placing the submarines at precise intervals. Mathematical spacing, perfect geometry. Each submarine station 40 nautical miles from the next, creating overlapping coverage zones where nothing could pass undetected. Except the Japanese did not know their code was broken. They did not know American ships were hunting them with perfect intelligence. They believed their submarines remained hidden, invisible scouts waiting patiently for American carrier task forces that intelligence promised would arrive within days. USS George gained sonar contact on another submarine, Row 104, another Kaiju-class boat, same specifications as Row 106, 600 tons, 56 crew, 4 torpedo tubes, 1 deck gun. Commissioned only months earlier, this was Row 104's second war patrol. George attacked. Miss. George attacked again. Miss. George attacked a third time. Miss. George attacked a fourth time. Miss. George attacked a fifth time. Miss. The submarine's commander was exceptionally skilled. He had learned to read sonar pings, to anticipate attack patterns, to maneuver into positions where Hedgehog projectiles could not reach. For over an hour, George pursued the submarine, launching attack after attack, missing every time. The England moved into position. Williamson studied the situation. George had made 5 attacks without success. The submarine commander now understood Hedgehog patterns. He knew the timing, he knew the spacing, he knew how to evade, so Williamson changed the pattern. He calculated a new approach angle, adjusted the timing, modified the firing solution to account for what the submarine commander expected, then attacked from a direction the Japanese would not anticipate. First attack, miss. The submarine evaded as expected, but the miss provided Williamson with more information. The submarine's evasion pattern was predictable. It followed doctrine. Japanese submarine commanders were trained to specific maneuvers, standardized responses to standardized threats. But Hedgehog was not standard. Hedgehog was new. The Japanese had no doctrine for countering it. They were applying old solutions to new problems. Second attack. Fire. 10 to 12 projectiles struck Row 104. The submarine broke apart. Sounds of bulkheads collapsing transmitted through water like thunder. Oil spread across the surface. Debris followed. 56 more men joined 106 previous casualties in graves the ocean would never reveal. The England had sunk 2 submarines in 2 days. The crew began to believe they might actually survive this war. Some men talked about home. Others wrote letters they would mail when the ship returned to port. A few played cards, betting with worthless paper money, laughing at jokes that were not particularly funny, but served to release tension that accumulated in every man's chest, like pressure building behind a bulkhead door. Williamson drank his coffee in the wardroom and thought about the 76 Japanese submariners who had died today. 76 men who woke up this morning expecting to complete their patrol, return to base, write letters to their own families, eat hot meals, sleep in beds that did not roll with ocean swells. War was mathematics. Subtract enemy submarines, add American advantages, calculate probability, execute solutions. But mathematics did not account for the weight that accumulated in a man's chest when he realized he had become proficient at killing. May 24th, 01:20 hours. USS George detected another radar contact. Submarine on the surface. Range 17,000 yards. The contact dived immediately. The submarine was Row 116, proceeding to its assigned station, unaware that 2 sister submarines had already been destroyed, unaware that American hunter-killer groups were systematically dismantling the entire NA line. George closed to attack range. Made sonar contact. Attacked. Missed. Attacked again. Missed. Attacked again. Missed. Attacked again. Missed. The submarine's commander was learning. He had heard the distant explosions from Row 104's death. He knew American ships were hunting submarines with new weapons. He knew survival depended on battery power and evasive skill. England moved in. 01:50 hours. Sonar contact established. Range closing. The submarine was trying a new tactic, running slow and deep, minimizing acoustic signature, hoping to blend into thermal layers and background ocean noise. Williamson adjusted the attack parameters. The Hedgehog firing solution required precise calculations: depth, speed, course, temperature gradients that bent sound waves, salinity variations that affected sonar propagation. Every variable mattered. Small errors meant misses. Accuracy required understanding how physics and engineering intersected in cold Pacific water. Fire. 24 projectiles arced into darkness. The crew waited. Sonar tracked the descending bombs. Tracked the submarine. The geometry, the AMSO pay, aligned. 3 to 5 detonations struck row 116, smaller explosions than usual. Perhaps fewer direct hits. Perhaps the submarine's angle deflected some impacts, but 3 hits were enough. Pressure hull breached. Water flooded forward compartments. The submarine lost trim, bow tilting down, stern rising, unable to maintain depth control. She plunged deeper, past crushed depth, past the point where steel could withstand external pressure. 56 more crew members died instantly, crushed and drowned simultaneously in darkness absolute and final. Oil appeared at sunrise, small quantity compared to previous kills. But the oil slick expanded through the day, spreading across several square miles by evening, confirming the submarine would never surface again. 3 submarines in 6 days. The crew stopped talking about luck. This was not luck. This was skill. This was training. This was technology. This was the England proving that small warships with good crews and modern equipment could dominate ocean spaces previously considered too vast for effective anti-submarine operations. But Admiral Toyoda in Tawi-Tawi did not know his NA line was collapsing. Communication security prevented submarines from transmitting except in emergencies. Radio silence protected their positions, but left commanders blind to developing situations. Toyoda studied charts and waited for contact reports that would never arrive. May 26th. The 3 destroyer escorts had depleted their Hedgehog ammunition. They needed resupply. A hunter-killer group centered on escort carrier USS Hogat Bay arrived with fresh supplies, additional destroyer escorts, and new orders. Continue the sweep. Find the remaining submarines. Destroy the NA line completely. USS Spangler joined the formation. 4 destroyer escorts now. Greater coverage. More sonar arrays. More Hedgehog launchers. The mathematics shifted further in American favor. That evening, 2300 hours, England gained sonar contact on row 108. Lieutenant Commander Williamson studied the contact data. Another Kaishu-class submarine. Same specifications. Same vulnerabilities. But this submarine's commander had heard the previous explosions. He knew American ships were hunting submarines with deadly efficiency. He was afraid. Fear makes men cautious. Fear makes men hesitate. Fear makes men second-guess decisions that should be instinctive. The submarine's evasion patterns were defensive, conservative, predictable. Williamson ordered the attack run. The crew moved to stations with practiced efficiency. 6 successful attacks had created confidence. Men knew their jobs. Men trusted their equipment. Men believed they would survive this encounter. Fire. The Hedgehog projectiles launched. Direct hits on the first salvo. Multiple explosions struck row 108 simultaneously. The submarine broke apart immediately. No prolonged death. No slow flooding. Just catastrophic structural failure, followed by immediate sinking. 56 crew members had perhaps 2 seconds to understand what was happening before water pressure crushed consciousness from their brains. 4 submarines in 8 days. The England had become the deadliest anti-submarine warship in history. No other vessel had sunk 4 submarines in such a short time span. The British destroyer HMS Starling had sunk 6 U-boats over 19 days in February 1944. The England had surpassed half that total in 8 days, and 2 submarines remained on the NA line. The crew celebrated briefly. Coffee tasted better. Card games grew louder. Men smiled more easily. They had proven something important. Destroyer escorts were not economy vessels assigned to boring convoy protection. Destroyer escorts could hunt. Destroyer escorts could kill. Destroyer escorts could change the course of submarine warfare. But the weight in Williamson's chest grew heavier. 268 men dead, 200 caught. 68 Japanese submariners who would never return home. 268 families who would receive telegrams with impersonal language about honor and sacrifice and dying for the Emperor. Williamson knew the Japanese would kill American submariners with equal efficiency. He knew Japanese destroyers hunted American submarines. He knew this war had no room for mercy or second thoughts. But knowing did not reduce the weight. Knowing did not make the coffee taste better. Knowing did not help him sleep when his mind replayed the sounds of imploding pressure hulls and men drowning in darkness. May 30th, 0400 hours. USS Hazelwood, escorting the Hogat Bay, gained radar contact on a surfaced submarine, row 105. The submarine dived immediately. Multiple American ships converged, destroyers, destroyer escorts, aircraft from the Hogat Bay. Everyone wanted this kill. Row 105 carried Captain Ryonosuke, commander of Submarine Division 51, a highly experienced officer, veteran of multiple patrols, skilled in submarine tactics and evasion. For 24 hours, American ships pursued row 105, multiple attacks, multiple misses. The submarine commander was brilliant. He used every thermal layer. He exploited every acoustic shadow. He maneuvered through zones where sonar signals scattered into useless noise. He conserved battery power. He rationed air. He kept his crew calm through endless depth charge explosions and hedgehog patterns that splashed around his submarine like deadly rain that somehow never quite struck. The England requested permission to join the hunt. Request denied. Other ships wanted the glory. Other commanders wanted their own submarine kill. England was ordered to maintain patrol pattern. Stay in assigned area. Let other ships finish this one. But after 24 hours, row 105 remained alive, battery power nearly exhausted, air quality deteriorating, but alive, surfacing between American ships, using their positions as shields, preventing clear shots, buying time, hoping American commanders would make mistakes that would allow escape. Finally, the England received permission, requested coordinates, joined the hunt. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Williamson studied the tactical situation. Multiple American ships surrounded the submarine. Sonar signals overlapped, creating interference patterns. Depth charges had stirred the ocean into acoustic chaos. Finding a submarine in this confusion seemed impossible. But Williamson had sunk 4 submarines already. He understood sonar. He understood how submarines maneuvered under pressure. He understood that even brilliant submarine commanders followed patterns, used tactics that could be predicted if you knew what to look for. He calculated where the submarine would go next, not where it was now, where it would be when the Hedgehog projectiles arrived. He adjusted for battery depletion, adjusted for air quality degradation, adjusted for crew exhaustion, adjusted for the desperation that makes men take risks they would normally avoid. The England moved into position, 05:45 hours, sonar contact, weak signal. The submarine was nearly invisible in the acoustic confusion, but Williamson trusted his calculations. He trusted his equipment. He trusted his crew. Fire. 24 projectiles fell through disturbed water. Other ships watched. Some officers thought this was another miss. The submarine was too deep. The signal was too weak. The interference was too strong. Multiple explosions. Direct hits. Row 105 imploded. Captain Ryonosuke and his entire crew died instantly. The submarine sank, taking with it the commander of Submarine Division 51, the last experienced officer on the NA line, the final submarine that might have warned Admiral Toyoda that American forces were approaching. 5 submarines in 12 days. The England had destroyed 5/7 of the entire NA line. Row 109 and Row 112 had returned to port earlier due to mechanical problems. 2 submarines survived. 5 were dead. The mathematics of the NA line had collapsed into mathematical certainty. Admiral Toyoda's early warning system no longer existed. On May 31, 1944, Admiral Toyoda received fragmentary reports. Submarine silence, no contact reports, no scouting data, nothing. He made his decision based on incomplete information. The heavy American build-up at Manus Island, the loss of his submarines in that area, indicated an attack on the Palau Islands. He ordered his combined fleet to move toward the Palaus. 2 weeks later, American naval and land forces invaded the Marianas, Saipan, Tinian, Guam. The strategic islands that controlled approaches to the Philippines fell to American assault. Japanese defenders fought desperately. American casualties were heavy. But the outcome was never in doubt, and Admiral Toyoda's fleet arrived too late. His ships were positioned to defend the Palaus. The invasion struck the Marianas. The Battle of the Philippine Sea began on June 19th. American carrier aircraft destroyed hundreds of Japanese planes in what would be called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. 3 Japanese carriers sank. The naval battle Japan needed to win became the defeat Japan could not afford. All because 5 submarines died in 12 days. All because a small destroyer escort with a well-trained crew and a British weapon system systematically destroyed an early warning line that would have given Japan time to position its fleet correctly. War turns on small moments. Individual actions that seem insignificant accumulate into strategic consequences. The England's crew did not know they were changing the course of the Pacific War. They were just hunting submarines, following orders, executing attack runs, sinking enemy vessels that would have sunk, American ships if given the chance, but history would remember. On June 25, 1944, the Imperial Japanese Navy declared all 5 submarines presumed lost. I-16, Row 106, Row 104, Row 116, Row 108, and Row 105 were stricken from the Navy list. 328 crew members were recorded as killed in action. Families received notifications. Memorial services were held. Names were entered into records that no one would read for decades. Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, sent a message to the England. There will always be an England in the United States Navy. It was a promise. It was recognition. It was acknowledgement that this small destroyer escort, with its economy construction and limited armament, had achieved something extraordinary. The crew of the England continued their service. Through summer 1944, they escorted convoys throughout the Solomon Islands. They protected supply ships. They guarded troop transports. They performed the routine duties that won wars through logistics, rather than glory. In August, the England ran aground at Seadler Harbour in the Admiralty Islands. Repairs took weeks. The ship that had hunted submarines with such deadly efficiency was temporarily sidelined by simple navigation error in shallow water. Men who survived combat faced bureaucratic investigations about grounding incidents. By October, the England was back in service, escorting reinforcement convoys to newly invaded Leyte in the Philippines. The war continued. American forces advanced. Japanese forces retreated. Islands changed hands. Men died in numbers that made individual deaths seem insignificant. May 9th, 1945. The England was screening a convoy near Okinawa when 3 Japanese dive bombers appeared through cloud cover. Anti-aircraft guns opened fire. 1 plane exploded. Another veered away trailing smoke. The third, already damaged, could not pull out of its dive. The aircraft struck. The England amidships. Fire erupted. Explosions rippled through the superstructure. Casualties mounted. The damage was severe enough that the England sailed back to the United States for repairs. She arrived in San Francisco while workers were still repairing battle damage. The war ended while the England sat in port. Japan surrendered. The Pacific War concluded. The England never fired her guns in anger again. She was decommissioned in November 1945, sold for scrap in 1946. Her steel was melted down and repurposed for peacetime industries. The ship that had sunk 6 submarines in 12 days ceased to exist as a physical object, but the record remained. 6 submarines, 12 days. A feat unmatched in the history of anti-submarine warfare. The British destroyer HMS Starling sank 14 U-boats over her entire wartime career, making her the most successful anti-submarine vessel of World War II. But no single ship ever duplicated the England's concentrated achievement. 6 kills in 12 days. Mathematics turned into naval history. The technology that enabled these victories spread throughout the Navy. Hedgehog systems became standard equipment on destroyer escorts. Sonar improved, radar improved, fire control integration improved. The lessons learned from the England's success informed every subsequent anti-submarine operation. Lieutenant John Williamson, the executive officer who directed most of the attacks, retired from the Navy as a captain. He wrote about the experience decades later, describing the technical details, the tactical decisions, the weight of killing that never fully left his consciousness. He remembered the young seaman who asked about the men who died on I-16. He remembered that cup of coffee that did not taste as good as expected. He remembered 268 Japanese submariners who died in darkness beneath Pacific waves. The Hedgehog weapon system continued service through the Cold War. American destroyer escorts and destroyers carried the system for decades. Eventually, homing torpedoes replaced forward-throwing mortars. Technology advanced, new weapons emerged. But for years, the Hedgehog remained the primary submarine killer, the weapon that had proven its worth through multiple kills, the innovation that had turned submarine hunting from luck-based encounters into precision operations. Statistics revealed the weapon's effectiveness. During World War II, traditional depth charge attacks achieved kills at a ratio of 60-1, 60 attacks for every submarine sunk. The Hedgehog achieved kills at a ratio of 5.7-1, nearly 6 attacks for every submarine sunk. The improvement was not marginal, it was revolutionary. The engineering was simple: 24 projectiles, contact fuses, 35 pounds of Torpex explosive per bomb. No complicated electronics, no guidance systems, just physics and geometry, and men who understood how to calculate firing solutions that accounted for depth, speed, course, and acoustic conditions. The Japanese never developed adequate countermeasures. Their submarine doctrine emphasized attacking warships rather than evading hunters. Their commanders were trained for offensive operations, not defensive evasion. When American destroyer escorts began hunting submarines with Hedgehog systems and modern sonar, Japanese submarines became targets rather than threats. By late 1944, Japanese submarine operations had become increasingly desperate. Transport missions to isolated garrisons, supply runs to bypassed islands, Kaiten suicide torpedoes launched from submarines that could not survive conventional attacks. The submarine force that had begun the war with some of the largest, longest-ranged boats in existence ended the war with coastal defense missions and suicide weapons. The England demonstrated what American industry had achieved: mass production of destroyer escorts, standardized designs, rapid construction, modern equipment, well-trained crews. The combination transformed naval warfare from capital ship battles to coordinated operations, where small warships with specialized weapons could dominate ocean spaces previously controlled by submarines. Admiral Toyoda's NA line had been a good strategy. Position submarines across likely invasion routes. Report American fleet movements. Give Japanese commanders time to respond. The strategy would have worked if American code breakers had not broken Japanese naval codes. The strategy would have worked if destroyer escorts had not been equipped with Hedgehog systems. The strategy would have worked if the England's crew had been less skilled. But codes were broken. Equipment was installed. Crews were trained. The NA line collapsed in 12 days. 5 submarines destroyed. 2 submarines withdrew with mechanical problems. 0 contact reports transmitted. Admiral Toyoda made strategic decisions based on absence of information, positioned his fleet to defend islands. Americans never intended to invade, arrived at the wrong battle too late to influence the outcome. Small moments, small decisions, small actions. They accumulated into strategic consequences that changed the Pacific War. In 1963, a new ship entered service, USS England, a Leahy-class guided missile cruiser, designation CG-22. Admiral King's promise had been kept. There would always be an England in the United States Navy. The New England served in Vietnam, served in Desert Storm, was decommissioned in 1994, scrapped in 2004. Since then, no ship has carried the name. Admiral King's promise has been broken. The Navy that once guaranteed perpetual memory has allowed the name to fade from active service. The England exists now only in historical records, in books about naval warfare, in articles about anti-submarine operations, in memories that grow dimmer as veterans die and younger generations focus on modern conflicts. But the record remains. 6 submarines in 12 days, a feat unequalled in naval history. The small destroyer escort with a well-trained crew and a British weapon system that hunted submarines with mathematical precision and deadly efficiency. The Japanese could not believe it. A worthless destroyer escort. Small, lightly armed, economically constructed. It sank their submarines like shooting fish in a barrel. It destroyed their early warning system. It enabled an invasion they never saw coming. It contributed to a naval battle they could not win. Admiral Toyoda received the reports months after the fact. 5 submarines lost, 328 crew members dead. The NA line completely destroyed. He never learned about the England specifically. He never knew that one ship had accounted for 5 of the losses. He knew only that his submarines had failed, that his early warning system had collapsed, that his strategic planning had been undermined by events he could not predict or control. In Tokyo, naval staff officers studied the losses. They analyzed tactics. They examined communications. They tried to understand how 5 submarines could disappear so quickly from a carefully planned defensive line. They never fully grasped that American signals intelligence had decoded their orders, that American ships knew exact submarine positions before attacks began, that American crews had trained specifically for submarine hunting operations. The war was lost through many failures, strategic misjudgments, industrial limitations, resource shortages, but it was also lost through small tactical defeats that accumulated into strategic collapse. 5 submarines in 12 days, that was one of those defeats, small enough that historians rarely mention it. Significant enough that the Marianas invasion succeeded partly because Japan's early warning system had been destroyed before American carriers arrived. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and do not forget to subscribe.